Pete. You're on the opposite side of the table to me again.
As always, it's fantastic to be over here on the opposite side of the table and really looking forward to today's topic. I know it's definitely one that a lot of organisations are top of mind at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. What's been keeping you busy the last couple of weeks since we were in the studio together?
Yeah, look, been travelling around, been in New Zealand, as across in New Zealand for the Kaseya event over there. So it's fantastic to spend some time with customers and also have a chat to some prospective customers as well. And we've been doing a number of lunches as well. And I always love a good lunch.
Yep.
And I've done a couple of those with prospective customers as well, which has been really exciting.
Yeah, fabulous. I was actually lucky enough to be a part of a lunch with a customer on not last Friday, the Friday before. So I agree. I couldn't think of a better way to spend a Friday afternoon.
And really looking forward that this Friday is actually International Women's Day lunch as well. So a little bit delayed because of our good friend Cyclone Alfred that interrupted things, but always good to have a Friday long lunch to look forward to.
It's going to be awesome. I'm very much looking forward to it. A bit nervous, but we're nearly there. So exciting times. All right, we're talking about automation today and how we can leverage this in our businesses.
Yeah, look, I think everyone's looking for that efficiency. How can you go and do more with less?
Yeah.
The reality is the technology landscape's getting more complex and the more tools and processes, and really it's about how to actually remove the human glue and use automation to drive that. And what are you seeing from your customers in regards to automation and where they're thinking about that?
I think this is such a hot topic at the moment, particularly with the rise in the conversations around AI and everything AI can do.
I was
for us.
wondering how long it was going to be before you dropped the AI word there and
What are
there.
we, 2 minutes in?
Yeah.
I just think, it's such a hot topic at the moment and everyone's sort of looking for that productivity element. How can they be more efficient? How can they do more with less? How can they remove the people element and the people, like you said, glue? But I also think, that error as well, right? Automation sort of just makes it happen. And I think that marketing has actually been on the forefront of automation a lot longer than other industries. Marketing tools, I think, have evolved a lot quicker than, say, the AI discussions that we're having at the moment. Things like Copilot, ChatGPT. Before all of that, we were using automation years ago, for automating email sends and scheduling social media posts and things like that. And I now am seeing AI plugging into that, but that automation element was there long before the AIs started plugging into it. So it's definitely something I am seeing evolve in the marketing industry if I put my marketing sort of hat on. But then when I take that off and I see that, and I explore that TSP side of things, SI, software development, I actually think we're still very fresh into this. I don't know if you would agree, but I'm just not seeing that uptake, particularly, and you look, I can talk to this quite strongly from the marketing automation perspective. We're not seeing that uptake as quickly as what I think we're seeing in other industries or more established marketing reliant industries having.
Look, if I cast my mind back, probably 12 years ago, and that's where HubSpot really described itself as a marketing automation platform back then. But when I think about automation, I think about signals. And, there's signals that happen inside of a business, and it's how you respond to those. And you describe some of those from a marketing perspective. When a customer clicks on a CTA, what do you automatically do after that? Do you move that deal? Do you go and send a nurture email with an ebook? What is it that you do that responds to that? And I think that's really for our listeners to think about, well, what are those signals in your business that occur? And then what do you do with that? Like today, you're probably doing a human process that sits that. So, when you get an inbound email from a customer, a new lead, what do you do with it? When a ticket's raised for, maybe low disk space, what do you go and do about that? When a ticket's about to breach an SLA, what do you do about it? So there's all of these things that are, I think, about as signals that you can then go and create an automated response directly for. And I think, the tooling is making it easier for us to do that. But I always think about, well, what does the business process look like that underpins that? And what are we really trying to achieve? Like automating for automating's sake, really doesn't make a lot of sense. And I don't know if you remember, Kayla, that when I took on the role of CEO at MAQ Digital, I took our executive leadership team and our senior leadership team out to go and see one of my friend's businesses. So, this was a business that manufactures chains. So, an incredibly successful business there. And what I thought was interesting, and I walked all of the team through that, is they had mapped their entire end-to-end business process on a giant wall. And everyone could see where the friction was in those processes, and then be able to focus on, well, what's going to give us the highest impact? Where are we going to get our best bang for buck in regards to the investment of time to automate, but also any tools or business process changes that might need to occur in order to do that. So I don't know if you remember that bus trip out to, I've actually forgotten the suburb. It's one of those, industrial suburbs that you normally only go to if you're looking for sort of a manufacturing warehouse.
Yeah, I do remember that. And they had almost what I would call a war room, where people could go in and everything was mapped out on a wall and sticky notes, and they could basically, like you said, understand where there is room for efficiency and where really needs that people element. So I think you're right. I think automating for the sake of automating is not always the answer. I think one of the downfalls that I see with automation is it really takes that, basically what you've just said, it really takes that zooming out, the ability to zoom out and have a look at the process end to end and actually plan where you want things to happen at what points. Because I just think that is one of the key downfalls is, and why we're not seeing that uptake as I think quickly, because it requires that, okay, I want this to happen. I want this ebook to be sent out at this point in the customer's journey. Okay, I've got to go and write that ebook. It's actually, thinking about that end to end, I think, is the actual challenge. The automation itself is not the challenge.
Yeah, to put on my McKinsey sort of consulting hat, I think it's really understanding what the as-is state is. So, what is the current state? But then also think about, what do you want that future state to look like? Because it's no point just automating what you've already got, using it as an opportunity to be able to then transform and think about how you do things differently. Because just because that's the way that you've always done something doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way that you want to do it now or into the future. And I think the first step is building up that tribal knowledge, so that, where is it that you capture all of the way that you do things around here? Look, let's face it, as IT folks, we're typically pretty bad at documenting things. As much as we have an intent to use IT glue and have everything documented on an individual customer level, we don't even do that. So, having that organizational view is even more challenging with that. And I think one of the things that I've seen work well in the past, and something we even do at Digital Team today, is capture all of that tribal knowledge. As someone new comes into business, they can then go to Confluence or insert tool of choice here. We use Confluence and find that really effective. Documenting how it's done, so that when somebody wants to know, how do I go and book travel? How do I then go and issue a contract? What are then my tools of reference that I've got in regards to that? They're all in one central location.
I think as well, to add to that and sort of talks into the automation piece, the one thing I don't love about doing that is the having to write everything out and write everything down. But now my laptop has a transcribe feature and it captures pretty much what I'm saying word for word. There's sometimes a few mistakes in there. You can actually write things out very, very quickly now with, a transcribe feature. You can chuck that into an AI tool and it will, almost sort of sharpen it up a little bit for you as well. And, within, I'd almost say 10, 20 minutes, you've got a process.
Yeah, the ability to build out that SOP or that standard operating procedure.
Exactly.
And I think even using tools like Copilot and M365 or ChatGPT in order to be able to build that. But one of the things that we've recently done that we found really effective is put an agent over the top of Confluence.
Mm-hmm.
So although we've got all this magical, knowledge that sits inside of it, we're humans. We don't necessarily go and find it. We'll ask somebody else. Well, now we can. We've built our own chatbot using Copilot Studio over the top of Confluence, so you can now ask all of those questions without even knowing which knowledge base to go to.
Yeah, the opportunities really are limitless, aren't they? It's becoming easier and easier, I think, to document things and search for things without having to search too hard. We're about to go through the same thing at Inception, implementing Copilot over the top of our systems so that the staff can actually search on how to do things. So, but again, it comes back to having that base knowledge stored and written down somewhere, right?
Yeah, the way we do things around here. And look, this is often what in IT you call technical debt.
Mm-hmm.
So, you make a decision and you pay for that at some stage down the track. And I think as the organisation grows, it gets harder and harder to be able to do that open heart surgery. And I remember back to my days at MOQ Digital, and I often describe that the business was held together by the world's most expensive glue, and that was human glue. And that's because some of those systems and processes, the efficiency hadn't been driven. And the only way to solve the problem was just throw more people at it, which becomes super expensive over time. But also you lose the ability to have that repeatability and consistency, or somebody goes on leave and all of a sudden, the wheels start to go and fall off as a result of that. So I think the opportunity that IT businesses have today is really think about, well, what are those points of friction? Where does it take a lot of manual processing, and start to then carve those off? And, with tools like Power Automate especially, the ability to then be able to play a plumber, because I think that's often what you are when you are automating, is you're moving something from one system into another system and using an API in order to be able to wire that up and sort of basically build the connection between one system and another.
Do you think that's the first step for people in their automation journey, or for business owners in their automation journey? If they've got some cumbersome processes and they're looking to automate, do you think that is the first step, is mapping those out and actually understanding where they could potentially introduce some?
Yeah, where's the pain point?
Yeah.
Where's the pain point?
Yeah.
And look, we're working with a customer at the moment that's going through this journey internally as well, and they call them sad stories. So what they've done is they've gone and captured these sad stories across different parts of the business. So, where's the most friction inside of finance? Where's the most friction from the service desk team? Where's the friction that's from the account management team? And, they've written these up as a sad story, and then they're working through where they think they're going to get the biggest bang for buck. And look, it was interesting talking to that business leader. For him, some of those sad stories are, well, just toughen up. That's not that urgent and important, versus others that there's real value that they can see with making just some small tweaks that they're able to then improve that efficiency. But one of the things that they've used is the ability to then articulate this as a journey that the organisation's going on, because automation, like a lot of business change, is not a destination. It's something that you continue to evolve over time.
Business is a journey, right? It's never a destination. I think for probably the first 6 months of my business life, I really was like, I'm just trying to get to a point. When really you get there and then you want to get to the next point, right? And it's the same with your automation journey. You sort of think the utopia is there and you're going to get to it, but then you actually go, oh, we can actually do things better again. Now, I've got a question for you then. There's obviously points in the process, let's call it the automation process, that you can never take away fully the human element. And we talked about this, I think, every episode so far, that human element, picking up the phone, is still such a crucial pillar of your business. Where's the balance, Pete? Like, I've seen it work from a marketing perspective. I think you can automate, or a sales perspective, you can automate an email send with an ebook download, and that can go out once a customer reaches 10 touches on the website. But you can't, that is never going to get them to a sale, right? Where's the balance?
The magic happens when you're in front of the customer. Yeah. And I think anything that you can do that enables you to spend more time with customers and less time back of house moving paper from one pile to another pile, the more efficient you can get. And I remember my dad telling me a story, and he used to work for Metro Ford here in Brisbane, he had the same job for almost 50 years of his life working in spare parts. And he described the business process when he first started. On his desk, there was an in tray and an out tray. He would come in first thing in the morning, the in tray would be piled up super high. He'd take a piece of paper off the top of that pile and then do that process. It could be a warranty claim. It could have been ordering some parts, booking a car and whatever it might be done. He would take that and put it in his out tray, and someone would come along with a trolley and pick up his out tray and put it on someone else's in tray. And that was a business process that worked very effectively. He then describes that when he finished, he didn't have an in tray and an out tray. His in tray was effectively the inbox inside of Outlook. He then had a warehouse management system that he used for, supply chain ordering. He had a CRM to have all of the data about all of the customers to then call up and have a workflow that would say, these are the people to call today. So, that process continues to evolve over time. But I think what he describes also is what's happening now with cars like a Tesla, the automation that exists inside of that. So that when there's a problem with the car, it automatically calls back home and lets somebody know about that and potentially fix that, a software release directly to the car without even needing to go in and get that car serviced. But that's all driven from being able to capture that signal and respond to it accordingly. And one of the things that I often see with organisations that are trying to automate is they're looking for a tool. They're looking to buy a widget of some description. That could be ImiBot, it could be Peer, it could be Roost. But they're just a platform for automation. They provide some out-of-the-box capability, but not necessarily designed for your business. And just because you put the tool in doesn't mean that the problem goes away. It's the ability to then design your particular workflow over the top of that and continue to invest in that over time.
Such an interesting point. I was having this conversation with a customer the other day, actually. One of their products builds software development, right? It builds the code for software development. And they were saying that there's the happy path in software development. I'm sure you're probably familiar with this. A lot of those out-of-the-box tools are just the happy path, right? And they're designed for the happy path. But a lot of the time what happens, and this is, I think, the nature of business, things go a little bit skew-if. It goes off the happy path. Things take a little bit of a turn. You want to change things. And all of a sudden, that tool becomes redundant because it's no longer serving you. It only serves a particular path. So I think, to your point, keeping in mind that tools they're a tool. They're never going to be the absolute fix to your problem. It does require your input and your, development and training and tweaking to actually make it usable for your business and to get the best ROI out of that tool.
But I think every business is unique.
100%.
Your choice of PSA, your choice of RMM tool that you might be using, your choice of even the firewalls that you manage, your Sophos or Fortinet, all of these things are different. And you think about the possible endless combinations that you've got. There's no one tool that's going to be able to automatically automate all of those things. So the need for you to, maybe you've got some Aruba networking equipment, that the signal that comes off that equipment's going to be very different from something that comes off a Cisco device, for example.
What tools should MSPs, TSPs, SIs consider? Like what would be your top, let's say 5?
I always think about what have you already got in your quiver? Like rather than adding just another arrow in your quiver, what have you already got access to? Especially with Power Automate that most organisations have got access to through M365. the ability to then leverage that capability out of the box. It's got the ability to connect natively into APIs and be able to do that, but also look at the existing systems as well. One of the examples of one of the first automations that we put in Digital Team was automating Adobe Sign with Lever, which is our talent acquisition system, meaning that as soon as somebody's accepted an offer from Digital Team, that whole contract process is automated into Adobe Sign and then sent directly out to then the candidate to then sign directly off. And all of that plumbing was available out of the box. We didn't need to go and purchase any third-party tool in order to be able to then make that automation happen. So I think really it's about exploring, what tooling do you already have, but also looking at, what does Kaseya offer out of the box with Autotask or Halo PSA, or, what are those tools, without necessarily going and buying another shiny object, because I'm certainly guilty of it, especially when I go to Bunnings, of buying another shiny object that I might need. But also in business, I think it's very easy to just get caught up and go, this tool is going to solve everything, including world peace.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose, so I think Power Automate is probably a good place to start, right? Like, it's going to give you at least a basis, and then how does that plug into your other existing tools? So that might be your marketing automation tools or your customer service tools, or, I suppose let's just start with what you've got before, making recommendations.
Yeah, but I think also if we think about it, as technologists, we typically have the worst car in the street. Yeah, we're like that mechanic. We're so busy fixing everyone else's cars, or we're so busy fixing everyone else's IT infrastructure, that we've often got some of the worst infrastructure ourselves. And that's because it's that concept of, I could bill someone and fix there and get some revenue, or I could do something internally and not get that. So I think the other thing to think about on an automation journey is, how do you move into that low code environment? In other words, how do you empower the other not quite so tech savvy people in your business? So your service delivery manager, for example, how can they go and tweak a process? How can your accounts person then be able to go and tweak a process? Or how can your then service admin person? So that way they can continue to move the needle forward and not be reliant on someone with deep technical expertise. So even products like Zapier allow you to then be able to do so much workflow and automation, and once again be able to respond to various different signals that occur.
Love a good Zapier integration. It has saved my life many times. Have you seen over automation done?
Look, I'm a big fan is you can't automate too much. And look, I constantly play the game of whack-a-mole in our business, is that when a problem pops up, thinking about how do we solve this so it never, ever happens again? Because guess what, in business, if it's happened once, more than likely it's going to happen again. So how do you then prevent that? And so we have a continual business improvement ethos. One of our values is, how do we get 1% better every day? So one of the great examples of that is we order a birthday cake for every single team member. So on their birthday, we'll go and courier out a birthday cake out to the house so they can then go and celebrate that. One of the things I identified was that our team was manually ordering those to our supplier. So a week in advance, they'd look at whose birthday's in the next week. They would then send an email out to our supplier with, this is the message, this is the address, all of that information. I looked at that and said, that's not particularly efficient. Let's go and automate that process. So what do? We look at Bamboo HR, which is our HRIS, who's got a birthday in the next week. All of the data about that individual, their address, etc., is all there. And then we just automatically send the email out to our supplier in order to be able to then order the birthday cake. So thinking about how do you then drive that efficiency is really, I think, that opportunity about those sad stories to surface those up and continue to improve them.
Do you have to still send? Hit send on the email?
No, automatically done.
Wow.
So it's automatically sent out to our supplier with that.
Where do you think is a good place to start for TSPs? Like, obviously you said, let's map out the process, and I agree. I think that is the place to start, and sort of putting the red sticky note where you think you can improve. But is there sort of an area of the business that you would recommend looking at first in that process? Is it marketing? Is it customer service? Because I have a view on this, but is it accounts? Like, is there an area that you think should be looked at first?
Look, I think as any business owner, we always want to drive more revenue. So what are those processes that are going to drive more revenue? And I look at the work that Kaseya is doing with things like Cooperbots, for example. So Cooperbots is inside of Kaseya 365 natively. The ability to go and detect, low disk space, for example, go and solve that, at the manual process, delete the temp files, do all of the things that we normally would with that to be done in a fully automated way. But not only fix the problem, go and record that information back in our PSA as well to demonstrate value back to our customers and be able to then charge for that. So, I think one of the opportunities is what money are you leaving on the table because you're not necessarily being able to get to all of the activities that you should, that automation can potentially really drive for you.
Business owners are really time poor. So automation is essentially, I think, one of those easy wins that I think you can do to get time back. But it takes a lot of time up front, I think, to get that there. It's almost like an investment back into your business. Would you agree?
100% it's an investment. But like any investment, you want to get a return from that.
Yeah.
So I think the opportunity is, and I think automation's one of those things that you can very easily forecast. Well, we know how many times this happens in our business. This is roughly the cost that it's going to take to then drive that automation. And I think that's back to that point about those people that have sort of rolled out Roost or Peer or ImiBot or Insert Tool here. Without that continual improvement, you're not able to realise the value out of that. So it is definitely not a short-term investment. It is certainly a longer-term investment to enable you to achieve more with less.
I'm going to challenge you and say that I actually think that customer service is one of the key areas that business owners should consider first in the automation. And maybe I'm not challenging you because I'm sure you'll agree, but I'm seeing a trend in very recent times of TSPs and SIs losing contracts because they're not automated.
Yeah.
And the customer is demanding that automation from them. They want to speak to an AI, or they automatically want to have their problem solved if they type it into a chatbot or a email or something like that. And that's what I was saying at the beginning of this episode. I think that we're there from a ticketing perspective, but we're not there from a problem-solving perspective yet. So I actually think at this moment in time, this moment when this podcast is being recorded, I actually think that's the area that MSPs, TSPs, whatever, need to go and have a look at and go, okay, where am I missing the beat here?
I think customer experience is that opportunity that many, and I think customer service, because customer service is just table stakes.
Okay.
Customer experience being, well, how did the customer feel after interacting with me, is really that opportunity that any part of the business should be thinking about. Is that really how I wanted my customer to feel after that engagement? Were they delighted, or was it a bit, that was all right? Yeah. And using that to drive, a real experience. And that's also how you differentiate yourself, is, the experience you get with one organisation versus another. So one of my colleagues had a really good year recently, and he actually had the opportunity to go and potentially buy a McLaren. So maybe it was the Australian Grand Prix that got the blood rushing through the veins. But the experience that he described of going into that McLaren dealership was an experience in its own right. Little did I know, after he told me the story, this was the 16th time that he potentially about to sign a contract, but pulled back out again. But even despite that, they still created a great experience for that. So, can automation then drive that? And 100% it can. It can allow you to solve the problem more efficiently. It can allow, a delighted email to automatically be sent back out, not just a thumbs up, thumbs down using smile backs. So how do you then use that automation to differentiate?
Yeah, definitely. I think I think it definitely can be used in the customer experience, and it doesn't matter where that customer is in the sales cycle or the customer journey. You can plug automation in at any point.
100%. And so we've spoken a lot about automation and, there's different opportunities. And I think if we cast our mind back, we spoke about documenting those processes. How do you then unlock some of the things that you've already got without going and buying new shiny objects? What do you think the 3 tips are for people to take away for today's episode about how they can start on that automation journey?
Yeah, I think you nailed the first one. I think it's mapping out that process, looking at your business processes, and there's going to be multiple of them, right? And that customer journey end to end. Having a look at that and then getting that red sticky note. I'm a classic girl, right? I like a sticky note on a wall. Grabbing that red sticky note and going, this is where I can improve. This is where I can plug automation in. And then also a green sticky note, or maybe you want to swap the colors around. This is where I don't want to lose that human element, so I'm not going to plug automation in here. So I think mapping out that business journey. Second point, I think, is have a look at what you've already got in your tool set. So you said that. Have a look at what you've got and what you can potentially overlay on what you've already got, what you've got in access to at the moment that you're not currently using. And then point 3, I think, is have a look and go, what's the first step I want to improve? So doing a bit of almost a priority list and going, okay, what is not a priority right now? So it's back to that sad story point that you brought up before. What is the suck it up sad stories and what is the urgent sad stories that I need to improve and make happy?
Yeah, what are you prepared to let die on the vine, basically,
Exactly.
with that? But I think, look, just to add a 4th point in there as well is also, to sort of unpack that a little bit more is, what aren't you going to automate? So, what aren't you then going to necessarily get that value from? And the thing I think really to think about is done is better than perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Creating some automation is better than having a perfect automation.
Exactly. And you can always improve and refine over time. Awesome. Thank you, Pete.
What a wonderful episode that was. It was really good to see where we went with that. And I think the key takeaway is that, automation's here to stay.
Absolutely. I think it's only going to improve as time goes on. Once again, if you've got any feedback for us, we'd love to hear it. So pop a message through to the socials or shoot us a message via LinkedIn or whatever method works for you. We'd love to hear the feedback.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone.